recorded in front of a live studio.
Kami membaca pikiran Anda. Anda ingin memiliki banyak uang, mobil mahal, villa, kapal pesiar. Banyak sekali yang Anda inginkan. Dan kami ingin membantu Anda.
Sit down, you sit down, you sit down, you sit down,
Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome to Global Millennial MUN webinar. We are delighted to see all of you here today, and I hope that you are in excellent mood and are ready to gain lots of insights with us this evening. On today's webinar, we will be covering the topic of Women's Voice Matter, how women's voice have less impact than men's, with a spectacular speaker, Elizabeth Blackney, co-founder of Women's HQ, and Zara Mohammed, Secretary General Muslim Council of Britain. Firstly, I would like to express my gratitude for everyone, as through your participation, this event was made possible. This event was held with a purpose to gain deeper comprehension regarding women's voice matter against men's voice, especially in public and in our daily lives, since there is an increasing importance and much news about this issue. So we thank you for enabling us to create such impacts. Before going further, let me introduce myself first. My name is Azia Zala Isra, and you can simply refer me as Azia, and I'll be the Master of Ceremony and moderator for all of you in this webinar today. But before we begin, plenty of you have an abundance of questions in regards to the organizer of this webinar. We would like to give you a chance to get to know the Global Millennial Group a little bit closer. Let me introduce to you GMG. So GMG is a one self-development platform that strives for quality education and youth empowerment globally through various educational programs. We have worked with several international bodies as well as universities, as can be seen on the slide. We also have reached over 270 partners so far. We have over 15 programs which reach over 200,000 youth in over 35 countries. One of our programs is Global Millennial Model United Nations, or GMMUN. It comprises two main branches, which are the MUN Conference and the MUN School. We have 4 councils for each GMMUN conference. For the upcoming conference, we have UN Women, UNEP, UNHRC, as well as UNESCO for the councils. To give you a short overview of how GMMUN is, we have provided several testimonies. Next, we also have a testimony from one of our delegates. For more testimonies about GMMUN, you can also head to our Instagram at Global Millennial MUN. Before we wrap up this info session, let me shortly share with you the siblings of GMMUN. Here, as you can see, we have Wonder English, which is a program focused on public speaking, and Nisha SDGs Summit, which is perfect for anyone who's interested in SDGs and would like to increase their essay and presentation skills. We also have GM Scholarship, where we provide several options for scholarships and for anyone looking to gain extra knowledge about skills that will be useful throughout their journeys. Next, I will shortly introduce you to membership plans that we provide to ease your way in joining all of our programs. On the slide, you can see the benefits of each plan, which are bronze, silver, gold, and as for the prices for each, as well as the prices for each. It is a plan you do not want to miss on, so make sure to check it out after this webinar ends. I would also like to give you a brief introduction to GM Store, where we sell Global Millennial Group's official merchandise. Check the catalog on the link provided on the screen and snatch your favorite merchandise before it runs out. Lastly, we would like to share with you our very special referral code so that you can get a discount when registering for our programs. Register through join.gmillennial.com and use the code webinar-GMG to get your discount. You should put that in all capital locks, okay? And also, I have more exciting information for you. On behalf of GMG, we would like to give a chance for you guys to participate in the GMMUN conference for free. So imagine, for free, guys. So you want to know how to get this ticket? So you must share your Instagram story during this webinar and tag at Global Millennial Group and at Global Millennial MUN. Then take the screenshot of proof and submit it to the form bit.ly, dash GA-GMMUN, and the 5 lucky winners will be announced after the session ends in the Telegram group. So don't forget to take pictures or screenshots or take an Instagram story for this so that you can win it, guys. All right, so that is all for the info session. So next we will officially commence the event with an opening speech from the Director of Pre-Event Management, Ms. Hara Alia Amani. To Ms. Alia, the time is yours.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Azia. And yes, hi everyone. Welcome to Global Millennial MUN webinar. I'm so glad to have you here, every one of you. And I believe it's not just from Indonesia only. I can see some people from another country, and yeah, I'm really thankful about it. And of course, yeah, I wanted to say thank you so much to our amazing speaker. We have Miss Zara Mohammed and Miss Elizabeth Blackney as our speaker for today's session, and I believe they will give you more insights and more positive things to learn as well, because yeah, when else you're gonna learn from the experts. And yeah, I believe we will gonna have a great moment today and tonight. And of course, I know it's Saturday night when everyone are going out, having fun, hanging out. But here you guys are. Thank you so much for the chance, for letting me and our team to take part in your holiday, of course. And I hope it's gonna be useful. And if not, please let us know, and we will try to do our best in another opportunity. So yeah, thank you so much once again, and I hope you guys enjoy the webinar. And back to you, Azia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Alia, for the magnificent speech. Before we continue to the main session, I would like to remind everyone that the feedback form will be shared at the end of the session, and it will be closed today at 10 p.m. GMT +7 sharp. So make sure to fill it right after the webinar ends. Now let's get to the main event, shall we? Which is the discussion session with our awesome speakers. Today, we have this pleasure of being able to invite Elizabeth Blackney and Zara Mohammed to be with us and discuss the topic of Women's Voice Matter. To start, I will be giving a short introduction of our two speakers. First, Elizabeth Blackney is a co-founder of Women's HQ, which serves primarily Black and Brown women living in or transitioning from the shelter system in Washington, D.C. Women's HQ helps survivors uplift their voices, transform their lives, and disrupt cycles of poverty and systematic oppression and racism. She also designed all programs with a human rights-based approach informed by best practices in trauma-sensitive environments. Here with us today, we also have Zara Mohammed. She has a master's degree in human rights law and a training and development consultant. She was elected the first female, first Scot, and youngest Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain in February 2021. She's passionate about community change, empowering young people, and improving diversity and inclusion both with her communities and beyond. Prior to having been elected to her current post, she has served as an Assistant Secretary General in 2018 to 2020 for the Muslim Council of Britain, helping lead on the MCB's ongoing COVID-19 response work since the outset of the pandemic, and more recently, the MCB task force that delivered the campaign against forced cremations of COVID-19 deceased in Sri Lanka. Such a remarkable speakers we have with us today. So why don't we just greet them? So hi, Ms. Elizabeth and Ms. Zara. I hope you guys are having an awesome day so far.
Hi everyone. Lovely to join you. I guess this evening, but this morning here in the UK.
Yes, it's around 7:40 in here in Indonesia, but I hope that you guys all been well. So, without further ado, let's just start our discussion today. So I have some main questions here, which both of you can answer. It's all related to our topic, and I'm really excited about this. So to kick off the session, I would like to ask first from Elizabeth, what are your thoughts about the stigma that makes women's voice not equal against men's voice?
Sure. Well, and thank you all so much for having me. It's such an honor and a pleasure to join all of you. And listen, this is a question that we're debating in the United States on a lot of levels. And it's been a discussion, I think, throughout history, is how do we as women assert ourselves and fight kind of societal stigma? And it manifests itself differently in every culture. But I think what is most important to me is when, as women, we're addressing how do we break through stigma, it is really ensuring that the people in our lives, it starts in the home, but it also is the systems that we grow up in, is what does it mean to be a woman, and are we welcoming people into the space as women to listen and to learn and to understand that our hopes and dreams are not only about raising children, though that is magical, but there's a lot of other amazing things we can do that have nothing to do with our reproductive capability and choices. It is, there are women who are engineers and lawyers, and it is making sure that people understand that our productivity is not also the only thing that makes us equal. It is that we do all of the same things. There's a famous saying in the US from a woman who was an actor and a dancer in the mid 50s of last century, Ginger Rogers. And she said, I can do everything Fred Astaire can do, only I'm doing it backwards and in high heels. So there is embracing our own wholeness and modeling that for the women and girls around us is really important. But it is also ensuring that the men and boys that we are with and raising and going to school with embrace our complexity as well. We very easily embrace the complexity of men. We expect men to be complex, and it's important for us to embrace that for women as well.
That's such a great answer. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Now, maybe Zara, would you also like to share with us a little bit about your views on the stigma that makes women's voices are not as equal as men's?
Yeah, I think, being the first female elected into my role, I was elected at the age of 29. Thank you. It's great to share a panel with you as well, Elizabeth. And actually, thanks to everybody for the invitation today. I thought I would just kind of share my real lived experience of this. And so, I was elected at the age of 29, it's 10 months ago, but all of my predecessors were male, averaging around 55 years old. And I guess they fit the model leader that we are used to. So part of our challenge in this conversation is our own assumptions and understandings of what is a good leader and what is not. And I've met with lots of different leaders, ambassadors, and officials, and one of them said to me, Zara, you have a lot of challenges because not only are you really young and a woman and Muslim, and all these different things, but he said people's, even our own community's assumption of what is a good leader is a lot bigger than you. Bigger, bulkier, older, more facial hair. But the idea really is that we ourselves sometimes can be part of the problem, because we're also reinforcing that narrative. So for me, I was part of a leadership team. I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I was thinking, but am I the right person? Is there someone better? Will people listen to me? And I had to take as you said, Elizabeth, it's about the people around you saying, no, you can do it. You can do it. It's your own self-belief and competency, but also it's actually the need for change that's propelled me the most. The need to equalize, the need for equity, and also that, 50%, the other side. And, for me, I represent young people as well in that equation. So no longer are we just talking about one kind of diversity or even just it's about gender. We ourselves as women are more complex and we have multiple identities, as do ours do men, as the society, right? And as young people, we don't see ourselves in just one way. So I think really what's at stake here is not just the voice of women, but all of those other intersections, right? So for me, it's been quite an interesting journey where I'm going into these very male-dominated spaces and actually saying to myself, no, your voice does matter. You're the boss. but certainly you're in the room You have this God-given right. And if you don't speak up, who will? Who will? And if you don't say it and if you don't challenge it, but it's not about an aggressive conflict style conversation. I think a lot of it's about partnership and respect. But I'm sure as we go into the conversation more, we can kind of share a little bit more about that. But I guess just some of my kind of initial highlights, and I'll give you more of the stories in due course.
All right. Thank you so much. And once again, congratulations on the part. It's really great to be, the first woman in the Bad Council. It's just really great. So, next questions around this issue is, what should women do to be equal to men? So maybe Zara, you can maybe answer this question.
Well, I think the question itself is wrong. We're already there. So, let's not reinforce the question. So I think the question is really about how do we already know our rights. We already know what is right as a society. So I don't think anyone's ever challenged that, unless you have very kind of archaic views. The point more is how it's about the empowerment. It's about the self-confidence. It's about taking that step forward. It's about the equalizing force within us. So with my own journey, I know that, I've always been being a first. Let's talk about being a first. Yeah. So I guess many women here, particularly, and some of the men who are going to support us to do these things, when you're a first, there's no reference point. Okay. There isn't anybody there. There isn't anybody that you can relate to. There isn't a mentor. And the role that I'm in, there isn't anybody. I attended the G20 Interfaith Summit. I couldn't find myself in the global leaders of faith communities. I was the youngest person there, and there was a youth summit delegation. I probably should have been part of the youth delegation, but I was there speaking, and I know that I have all these multiple identities, and I have to speak well for all of them. And so when we're talking about women feeling more confident to take the space that's always been theirs. So first of all, don't feel like you need to earn it. It's already yours. Don't feel like you need to make that space. It's already there waiting for you. So the first barrier is within you. The second is about the allyship and relationship building. Before I was elected, I had a track record of delivery. I showed people what I could do. I'm not saying that it's a meritocracy, because we know that in this space, it's, often it's not. I don't say to women, oh, it's the best person who deserves the job, because otherwise we'll never be there. We're not even considered. We're not considered, right? So there has to be a healthy amount of, but are we really considering everybody? Because we already have these ideas of who is a leader and who is not, or where women should be and where women, and we profess that. So for me, the journey was about my own belief in who I was. I had to like myself first. I had to believe I could do it. Secondly, was about delivering. So you go into that space. There was a girl I met who studied dolphins. And she said, Zara, I don't think I can bring any benefit. I'm a Muslim woman. I study dolphins. I said, you're a trailblazer. You probably how many women are even in your space? I've got women, some of my friends are engineers. There were the only 2 engineers in their 500 strong class at university. I said, you're trailblazers. I said, it's difficult. And sometimes being in these spaces are very difficult, where there is a lot of alpha male dominance. And sometimes it's not because they're trying to put you down. It's just because they're just used to being like that. And so you have to hold your ground. You have to know how to communicate. You have to be confident in your communication. And I feel like that's been a really important tool for me in this journey, to be able to communicate to lots of different people. But finally, you have to take people with you. In the Muslim Council of Britain, we champion a lot of causes, and we challenge a lot of things like racism, Islamophobia, institutional racism. But we can't act like they just belong to us, right? The equality of women doesn't just belong to women. All of society has to be involved. Otherwise, we're just talking to ourselves. And for everybody on this call, you should know I was elected by a majority male. I was elected by mosques, by imams, by men, majority. That's who elected me. A lot of people say, well, how and why? Well, they'd seen what I've done before. They were happy with it. I built that relationship and rapport. But more importantly, they saw the need and the vision. They said, Zara, we've created our institutions, but our young women, our daughters, our granddaughters, our nieces and our sisters, they don't feel there's a place for them. They don't feel that they can connect. And so part of it is really about understanding that if we don't change things, nothing will change. It's about bringing people with us. But it's also having confidence that it's not all men are against us. And I've had a lot of challenges with women too, ladies. So I'd say that there's a lot involved in this question, but sometimes we have to check ourselves first. And I'll pass it over. I'm sure Elizabeth will have some even better insights.
Oh, I don't know about better, but I definitely want to pick up on that last point. I acknowledging two different things is super important to me. So one, I am a white lady and a middle-aged white woman from the United States. And there is so much, the identity of white women in the US, we are so often disconnected from our identities as women, just women, period, right? It's like, oh no, I'm here. Our so-called patriotism, all of these things are structures around our identity to keep us from saying or doing the things that really benefit not only our own country or our own town or our own family, but also how we navigate the world. And to me, this identity of being a woman, it's in my experience, I've always been a questioner. I want to know why, but why are we, I was the kid who asked why, but why, mommy, but why, all the time about everything. And the older I got, and then I'm still asking why in my career is, well, why are we in charge of anything? What does leadership really look like? Is leadership just, being loud and being bossy? It doesn't feel like that is leadership. That seems like being a bully. And asking those questions about what is leadership, how does your leadership manifest is so important. And as women, one of the things that I've been really, really fortunate to do is be the only American working in an institution, or one of two or three where there's like 600 other people who don't look like me, don't think like me, don't live like me, don't worship like me. And I'm not the default. I'm not in the majority. And it's forced me over my whole life. And thankfully, my father was a journalist. And so we always had the whole world was at our dinner table every night. And so I'm an only child. So I'm, my daddy's princess, and I'm also his only son, right? Like I know how to do things, the things that we know how to do that we identify as male, whether it is leadership or it is, fixing our car or changing a tire or, changing a toilet or laying grout or any of these things that we, particularly in the US, we've identified all these things as like, these are things that boys do and these are things that girls do. And as women, we, men have this responsibility too, and we can talk more about that as we go through the session. But to me as women, it is being able to say, but why? Why is it this certain way? And when people start asking each other why, they start going, God, I don't know why we were doing this. I don't know. We don't remember why. This is just what we've done. Well, maybe we do something different. And those kinds of conversations that happen in a community are how firsts transform the future. And so a large group of people who probably had done things the same way for quite a while were like, why are we doing that though? Zara's right here. She knows all the things. It's the future. And so it's also accepting the yes of a moment when everybody starts asking why. It is stepping in and saying, I know why, and I know better, and leading that way and being welcoming. It doesn't always have to be that kind of bullying thing. Leadership is about consensus and buy-in and calling people in instead of always calling them out. Because there are people, if you feel like you have to call them out, you're going to have to get a lot of other people around them to be on your side before you can call people who are entrenched in an antiquated ideology to your cause. So there's leadership is just super important. And women have soft skills because we have to. And when we ask why and people agree, you have, things that are transformative for the future, like Zara's leadership. It's just remarkable. and so inspiring. I'm just so honored to be here with all of you. And with Zara, it's just remarkable. I've read about you for, I don't know, a couple of years and thinking, that's just really amazing. and we could use a lot more of younger voices, right? It's not just the female leadership, it is intergenerational leadership. It is ensuring that the people who have the most at stake in the future are also at the table.
All right. Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Zara. It's such an insightful answer. So I have another question, and I'm really curious about this. So maybe can you explain more detail about the importance of similarity between male and females voices that might happen in social media? Maybe Elizabeth, you can start with that.
Sure. So I view the internet as kind of the great leveler, right? We can see, we all have access to the same Instagram. We have the same access to all of these things. And one of the things I find fascinating about the times that we're in is that it's not just men and women, it is different expressions of gender identity completely. Here in the US, there's a lot of discussion now around Indigenous Americans who identify as two-spirit, where they have both male and female identities. And when I tell you that is a concept unfamiliar to entrenched white people, we are not ready for these conversations. And so allowing people to see, I view the internet as a place, certainly there are a lot of problems, but I want to talk about the hopeful side of it, is that how we express our identity, how we communicate with the people in our community and others around the world is leveled in that way, where we can see, what does it mean to be male? What does it mean to be female? Men can be soft. There's so many more discussions that I find really helpful. Men talking about mental health, men talking about their education journey, talking about being bullied when they were on sports teams when they were young, talking about how they were bullied when they were at church or whatever, wherever they were living their lives. There is a necessary welcoming. Women, we talk about our feelings all the time, in most cases. And it is, we have an ability to lead here. This is territory we are familiar with. We have whole weekends with our girlfriends where we talk about our feelings from the time we're very young. And regardless of what culture we're in, whether we're super integrated with boys in our lives or not integrated with boys in our lives at all, women have been getting together to talk about what men do for millennia. So this is a time when we can welcome men into that space. Like, men should be able to talk about their feelings. They should be able to talk about the challenges and the responsibility of the leadership that they were just handed, whether they wanted it or not. And so there are ways where we can have, soft skills are so important. It is necessary to diplomacy. It's necessary to policy making. It's necessary in every trauma room in a hospital ever. There are places on the internet where you can have those discussions because it feels safer for a lot of people to have a discussion with strangers on the internet than it feels like you can have that discussion with own members of your family or your religious leadership or your education, any of those kinds of other places where you interact. So to me, as women, we are kind of like the honeycomb of society, right? Like we hold many, many things. We hold multitudes. And so holding that space for men will help them see us, right? Like, we need to see more about their complexity, but they also need to be seen, not just as strong, silent protectors and providers, but as a guy whose feelings were hurt. These are important considerations when we're developing policy, because when you develop policy, it's all about the relationship between the people in the room, whether it's at the G20 or in a parliament or anything else, or even a local city council situation. Those interpersonal relationships really matter. And the internet gives us an ability to teach soft skills and help people to feel seen and listen more.
All right, thank you so much, Elizabeth. So, what about you, Zara? Can you share maybe your experience, what you think about women's rights to speak and express their thoughts or feelings? Is there enough awareness being raised? How serious is it in this current time?
I think there's always challenges. I mean, look, I agree with Elizabeth. I think social media has been an equalizer, an amplifier. It's given causes that would never have been given attention by the media attention. We saw Black Lives Matters. We see injustices all over the world. You know what political leaders do. Now there is a movement online, very quickly mobilization that something's wrong. We're going to call it out. Now any one of us can occupy global space, global real estate. You can actually have a cause, and we see that. And I think that's why even things around the environment are being so powerful, and there's so many drivers for change. I think when it comes to women, my background is in human rights law as well, so we looked at gender-based violence. We look at how women become weaponized in war. We look at even the environment. And I attended COP26, and some of the story, a majority of the women in the global south that suffer the most are women, right? They're the ones that have to go get the water. They're the ones that are taking care of the children. They're doing the agriculture and the land, but they're not at the decision-making table. They're not included in how are we going to do this better. And again, in politics, we see across the world, there's a variation, but again, it's harder and harder for women to get, to those political positions. So we can't kid ourselves that at every level and in every space, there is a markedly different challenge for women. But what social media has done is, again, provide us with a gateway to really share our experiences with audiences that we can connect to. And that's the whole point of it. With my own journey, when I was elected, within minutes, hours, international attention, social media was crazy. Everybody went crazy. It was really, really crazy. But the reason I highlight that was because I want to share with you both the positive and negative of that experience, and how that both empowered me, but also created stigma challenges for me as well. So I had certain parts of the media and social media that were very, very positive. This was a great win for women, for young people, for Muslim communities, for faith communities, and it was a huge success. But then there were other parts of the media and social media, and I just bring them together because, who said, well, she's just a puppet. She's a nice face, a pleasant voice. They're not going to really let her lead. She's just going to be there, but someone else is controlling her. And I have a very famous interview, a Women's Hour interview, ironically, which has kind of got me global attention too. But that was me on a women's show with a women presenter who was stereotyping me, undermining my achievement, attacking my faith, and really trivializing the idea of Muslim women in leadership, So there is an example where I'm in a women's space, I'm in a women's show, and look, the internet can be really mean, right? And we know for women who especially are in public positions, the kind of comments that I'll get sometimes, hateful or whatever it is, and we've got loads of stories. We know that mental health is massive, social media and online abuse and bullying, from the biggest celebrities to just our everyday people do a lot of bad things online. And so navigating that space, and even for myself, I had to think, well, okay, I need to use it as a force for good, but be cautious of it. And I think with all of us, you have to have lines. You've got to have your privacy, your private space. And you got to remember that also nowadays, everybody is on the internet. They're not your friend. They're not always your friend. They're not always your ally. And there are people who actually have a lot of time to just come and attack you. And I think coming back to the question, thinking about the challenges that we have as women, both that challenges narratives, but plays into them too. So on myself, the narrative around Muslim women in leadership is a very negative one, i.e., they can't do it. We all wear black. We're all one. There's only one type of Muslim women, one homogenous type. We're not a global community. We're not diverse. We're not colorful. We're all just one. We all stay at home. We're all oppressed. And I think about it. I'm sure in this room alone, we have women across every sector, every field, business industry, NASA. We've got women in all these different spaces, and we've got women who do startups, women entrepreneurs. But think about the resounding narrative around Muslim women in leadership. That's what I have to deal with. That's what I have to challenge. And while social media can be a force for good, it has also helped that negative stereotype. And as someone who has, is navigating that, I would just say to everybody listening that you have to have a balance, like with all things. And you got to remember that, there will be plenty of voices to say X, Y, and Z. This is what women are, and women can't lead. But then we need plenty more voices to challenge that, but not to waste our time in the argument, but instead to lead. And that's what I do. So I don't get caught up on my Twitter feed too much, but it hurts, right? And it can be very challenging. And if we know women, not everybody can access social media. First generation women who don't speak English as their first language, women in the world who don't have an internet connection. We have to be their ambassadors and voices too, as do we need the men to call it out when things are not great.
All right, thank you so much. So maybe can you also share with us, what are your thoughts about women's rights to speak and express their thoughts or feelings? Wait. Okay, because there is stigma that women's voice have less impact and are less heard, are less trusted than men's. So what is your thoughts on it and about women's rights to speak and express their thoughts or feelings?
I'll take that up. I so agree with what Zara was saying, and I think that this is really tied to it. I'd love to give just my own example here. Is one of the things that's really important when we're publicly visible or identified as senior staff to somebody who was very publicly visible. Most people know me from my work with Dr. Denny Mukwege, who fought rape as a weapon of war, continues to fight it. This week, his book, that's an Oprah book, came out, right? Like, supposed to be this just wonderful and amazing experience. And it is. But I think about all of the days leading up to this kind of really wonderful, lovely moment where everybody's like, oh, amazing, it's on Oprah. And I think there's so many women who are in the fight for their rights, who are talking about their experiences. I think of every woman that I have ever met, whether she was from Rwanda or Congo, Morocco, any of the places where I have worked with women who were fighting rape as a weapon of war, who had been subjected to rape as a weapon of war, or other sexual and interpersonal violence in their home. It's very easy to be strong when you are free. And to me, it's really important to acknowledge there are so many women who are not free to speak their feelings. They are not free to speak their ideas. 1 in 3 women experience sexual or interpersonal violence in their lifetime. There's a lot of women here today. That's 1 in 3. So, there's a lot of women who have experienced this. And I think it's not just our feelings about like policy in a very dry way. It is, how do the policies and understandings of what it means to be in charge, not leadership, right? Like, leadership to me is a totally separate situation. What it means to have the responsibility to be in charge of someone as a political leader is one thing, but when people perceive that they're in charge all the time, and it leads to the subjugation of women, it teaches men and boys that they're entitled to just be the boss all the time. But there's the other side of that, is there are many women, and I'm sure, Zara, you may have encountered this too, who do not want other women to succeed. And that's been the thing that has been the most troubling for me in my career. Is I think of all of the wonderful things this kind of culmination of many ideas and conversations that Dr. Mukwege has led with many, many different women. And it was such a uniquely beautiful experience to work for a man who is about feminist leadership, who is about that equality. But I think, you know, here in the US, we had this big Me Too moment, right? A moment that a white actress, you know, tweeted about, not knowing, because she didn't do her homework, that Me Too was a movement that had already been founded by a Black woman, Tarana Burke. And we had this, oh, we're all gonna handle it together now. Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And this summer, I am one of the signatories to a letter to the Time's Up organization and the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, who were a group of women who made promises to other women and failed to keep them. And in fact, helped perpetrators against other women because they were politically aligned. And so it is really important when we talk about how do we navigate these spaces, how do we talk about our thoughts and feelings? It is not only men who need reform. It is holding our sisters accountable who are in this space, who may have more power than another group of women in this space. And just yesterday, they announced that they are laying off all of their staff, and yet they still have not addressed any of the 8 systemic issues that were brought up. And so it's not just about our feelings. It's, to me, none of these changes can be made, implemented, and last if we aren't taking accountability and holding other people accountable in this space. And that's where the fearlessness of someone like Zara, who sat there, I watched that interview and I was like, this is why we wrote the letter. Because you have women who want to cling to Islamophobia or cling to ideas of being a good girl, right? So in my circles, I'm known as the rape girl, right? Because I'm always talking about how rape is not okay. I talk about gang rape all the time. I talk about rape as a weapon of war all the time. And it's totally destigmatized for me. But that is my privilege as a white woman from the United States. And so this is why I'm really strident about holding other women from my country and from Europe very accountable, and, you know, and being comfortable with walking away from opportunities, walking away from money, because to me, not all money is good money, walking away from chances to maybe make a bigger impact, but I wouldn't have had my integrity intact. And so that's why the leadership of someone like Zara is so important, because when you not only get the chance to lead, but everybody knows you're leading with integrity, it forces people like me who generally aren't, you know, one layer back from whoever the principal is. It forces us to make sure that we're holding ourselves and our teams accountable. And so it's complex to be in this space. But integrity, and when we have the ability and the privilege to put a stake in the ground and say, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to ensure that the stigma stops here. You know, I was fortunate enough to shed most of the stigma. I still, whenever I talk about it on the internet, I get, you know, there's the customary person who really just wants to tell women that they should be raped or die. And there comes a point when you are doing the work where you're like, yeah, well, you know, unless you're coming to my house, I really don't care. Say what you want, scream at the wind, bro. But it takes a long time to become that strong and to become that adept in this space. And so to me, it's just a responsibility I have to hold the space for as many women who are, you know, finding their voice to speak about their feelings, because it's complex. It's not just some kind of linear path. You go, you check a bunch of boxes and then you end up here. It doesn't work that way. It's more like, you know, this up and down, back and forth. And you have to be willing to lose friends to lead. And so when we talk about our feelings, it's there's a lot of layers to where we're navigating that. So to me, it's about accountability and integrity in the leadership. Because if women aren't going to have integrity and leadership and demonstrate real leadership, it's going to be really hard to get everybody to equal.
All right, thank you so much, Elizabeth. And I have a question for Ms. Zara. As the Secretary General Muslim Council of Britain, can you explain how did you start when you have been chosen to lead the Muslim Council, and how do you overcome the stigma around you when you have been chosen that day?
Sorry, yeah, that's a big question. And thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your solidarity and also for the example you gave, because you're absolutely right. Like, this is the challenge that we face. I guess the question you're really asking is about how did I get here? How did they let me in? And how did I overcome, I guess, some of those barriers on my journey to getting here as well?
Correct.
I think, I think, part of the challenges is that, we have to be honest about our communities and our experiences in those communities, but we also have to see a vision for change. I think what was always really important for me was I couldn't see, within the institutions, within the community. I was just like, how do I fit in? I really want to do things. I really want to help people. I want to serve. I want to be of service. But I just don't see a place where I can fit in. I don't feel I can belong, or I'm going to be, respected for my views, or I don't know. I think I just couldn't really see where I could fit in. And as I was kind of involved in all this community work, and, especially during my university time, I was really active and involved in the community space as well, and on the student scene, I realized that in sometimes it's about taking lots of steps forward, and it's about not being afraid to go into places where there isn't many like you, but knowing that plenty are behind you waiting to come with you. So I think, that actually once you start pushing yourself through, I mean, an example is that when I was in university, we have like student union presidents, so, the kind of student society. And I was part of the Islamic Society, but I would engage with everybody. I loved kind of doing social events. And I recall that, the student union was so impressed with my engagement with everybody, not just with Muslims. They said, Zara, have you considered running for student union president? Representing the 30,000 students that we have of the 40. And I just thought, well, but I'm a Muslim. Like, how would, I just kind of thought, but I look so different from everybody else. But what transcended how different I was my purpose and goal to serve, and my ability to connect with lots of different people. And I think that's what's been really important in my journey, is I actually put myself and all my differences to the side, and I focus on purpose and cause. And I think that's going to be a driving force. The other thing is, expect resistance. No one's gonna no one's gonna welcome you in. Expect it to be difficult. Why shouldn't it? Everybody in our history, in any history that we look at for the whole of time, whether it's about women, whether it's about ethnic minorities, whatever it is, there has to be challenge and resistance. There has to be no one likes to change things. People like the status quo. It's working. If it's not broken, why fix it? Yeah, not broken for you. So even in my own position, I had done a lot of community work. People had seen that, but I still wasn't a big name. I mean, I ran contested. We had a live TV channel debate. We had two debates, two leadership debates. I had to call and I had to campaign. I had to work really hard to get elected. It wasn't easy. And now being elected, I have to work really hard to show people why. But I don't expect them to accept me. I don't expect them to say, well, Zara, now, we're just, because that's not what leadership is about. That's not what life is about. We have to be the ones to change things, to champion that change. And we have to be the ones that are willing to accept that we have to be a bit more patient right now. We have to be a little bit more wise and tactful, but we also have to challenge. We have to be that voice. So I think, my journey has only worked because I've had the people behind me to say, no, Zara, you can do it. We believe in you. We think you should do it. Men, women, family. I've had the confidence to push myself forward, even when it's so tough and the pressure is so hard and I don't think I could do it. I've had to deal with comments like, do you think you're going to be able to handle it? Well, I'm not made of glass. I'm not going to break. I think I should be okay. I've had to deal with the challenges in the media. I have to deal with all the bias and all that. So I think the reality is that if we want to change things, we have to be willing to take the good and the bad. And we have to have a little bit of a thick skin to know that it's not going to be easy. And that actually the best things, you know, all of our biggest heroes in prison for 27 years, right? Mandela, you know, so everyone's had to fight hard for the things that we've got, but it's going to take time, and change happens naturally.
I really do agree with that, because some people just tend to want the good part and don't want the bad part. Thank you so much again, Zara. So now for Miss Elizabeth, as a co-founder of Women's HQ, how do you and your team help and guide some people that have such kind of harassments that's related to the issue? So how do you encourage them to speak up on their harassments?
Sure. So so founding Women's HQ is just kind of a natural outpost, place that I wanted to be. I've done a lot of work with women in the United States and around the world, and DC is a city that means a lot to me. It's the place that kind of helped to set my trajectory so I could have the career that I have and the life that I have. And I wanted to give back to other women in the city who had similar or even more traumatizing experiences than I had been through. And so what we're really excited about at Women's HQ is women who have fled domestic violence or sexualized violence in their home, who didn't have a safe place, are now, there's shelters in Washington, D.C. We help to fill the gap of making sure that we replace the things that they left behind, right? Like if you get a chance to leave, you don't always have a chance to pack a bag or take anything, right? Like sometimes they show up with nothing but their keys and their kids. And so we make sure we have a really wonderful partner at Good 360 to help meet the need gap of these things. We provide what we call survivor comfort kits that have the information and about our programming, but most importantly, it has, blankets, luxury skincare, jewelry, all of the things that you need. Bombas, which is a wonderful socially responsible company, provided socks, Uggs, provided blankets, Bed Bath & Beyond, these really Estee Lauder provided skincare. We made sure that there were the things that you might have to walk away from, that you can wake up with the things you need. As women, if you have left, often your career or your education are interrupted because you fled a place where you had all of your things, and now you may not have access to your bank account. You may not have access to any of those things. And so we help to provide the need gap so that the women have everything that they need. And then we also have our trauma-informed programming, which helps them with career enhancement. We partnered with LinkedIn, who provides one-to-one career coaching for these women from their senior executives. The thing, there's as much no in this work, but what I've been really excited about is that there are people and companies that are trying to figure out how to do better. And we've been really fortunate in that LinkedIn was like, this sounds like a great idea. And we'll do one-to-one, career coaching for the women in your programs with our senior executives. I'm like, I don't know I'm a middle-aged white lady with a good career. I've never met a senior executive at LinkedIn who wanted to help. And so to be able to help Black and brown women in Washington, D.C., and, they're women all across the career spectrum. So, I wrote an article a few years ago about being the perfect victim, and that doesn't exist. And so there's no curation of things that you could be as a woman that makes any of the violence that women experience make sense. And so we endeavor to make sure that the women in our programs have what they need. They can be women who worked in an embassy, who was there cleaning it. There was a very famous case about women who are being trafficked in embassies in the DC area. And some of those women went to shelters and are, getting their degrees and trying to get back into the workforce. And so we provide the career enhancement programming and trauma-informed programming in the arts that help them to process their trauma, because processing our trauma, there's an incredible book called The Body Keeps the Score. We store it in our body and in our amygdala, which doesn't have the capability of language. And so we endeavor to create an experience where you're able to start processing those things and kind of reclaim your space and your community. I love it so much.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So, I'm really learning so much already, and I'm constantly amazed at the large scope of the issue and the topic. So, I have another question. I know there's lots of questions, but is there any struggles when you try to help somebody that are affected by this issue? Maybe we can start from Zara.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that we have to be really careful of is not to presume how we think people want to be helped, not to presume how we're going to empower women, because we're all different, and we all have different interests, different ways of being. Not everybody wants to be the leader of an organization, not everybody wants to be. So I think equity, equality, and empowerment, they mean different things for different people. I think all of us have a baseline of what is injustice, and oppression and those kinds of things. Your inability to achieve something because of those barriers, whether they're institutional or someone else has put that in the way, that's not right. But you can't impose your version of empowerment on others. And working with diverse communities and people who come from all walks of life, sometimes people from a different generation or a different cultural understanding, the women even within those groups may not be comfortable with your understanding of empowerment. So you can't impose that on them. Maybe they come from very traditional structures, very conservative structures. They may feel empowered within that structure. So I think one thing is important, and we always have this with the West and East, we shouldn't presume that we know what, the East needs better than the West. And, coming from someone, I mean, my identity is British Pakistani, so, I've got all of these different, but it's also generational things. I think number one is don't bring your own impositions to what you think women need and don't need. And I think we hear this a lot, especially if you are a woman of color or myself, a little bit different. Our experiences are different. Our upbringing is different. Our culture, religion, all these different things are different. That's not to say that there isn't a place where we all have common solidarity. There's common issues that we all want to work towards, like gender pay gap, yeah, or equal opportunities in the workplace, or these kinds of things. But at the same time, you can't impose on me how I need to look or dress or act or behave, how I need to work with the opposite gender, because I have my own cultural understandings of what is what's comfortable, what's modest. So I think it's important that when we're talking about these issues, we're not imposing ourselves. And the other side of it is, it's always important for us to let women lead, but also not to exclude men in the conversation either. And I think it's a fine balance, because sometimes for too long, others have defined the narrative, define us without us, they decide who we are and who we are not. But at the same time, I know that there are certain groups that they've just become so isolated and insular that they exclude everybody else, right? So there's a fine balance. But what I found is most effective is take people with you because of cause and purpose and justice, nobody can deny that. And but don't try and change people's character and who they are as people and their experiences. I think we shouldn't trivialize and undermine what people have gone through. I myself have multiple identities, and I get questioned all the time about my British identity and my Muslim identity and my cultural identity. Which one is it? I said, look, they are the perfect harmony of what make me me, right? I couldn't be this person unless I went through all those experiences, unless my parents were the way they were and their upbringing and the upbringing that they gave me, my experiences with the world. And I think the second part of this is exposure. You need to expose yourself to uncomfortable environments and people who disagree with you. That is very healthy. You need to go to places where they don't agree with you, where they don't all look like you, because it's not about that being a confrontational thing, but that's about you learning and understanding where people come from and how you can engage with them. I've sat in the rooms with people who have completely opposite opinions, sometimes even racist opinions, but I choose to listen and think about, okay, how does this person get to this point of view? Where is the commonality? Where can we work from? Can we reach a point where both of us can understand? We will sometimes agree to disagree, but the progress of society depends on our ability to be able to work with lots of different kinds of people. And for women, we are not one homogenous block. We are diverse within ourselves. and how we want to be empowered and how we want to find equality or equity, that's going to be different for different people and their different experiences. But justice, human rights, our ability to be, there are things that transcend those things, and I think we could all work on those together.
Thank you. Maybe Elizabeth, you can pitch in on that question. Are there any struggles when you try to help somebody?
Oh yeah. Well, I've been told by a lot of my fellow white folks, are like, why are you going there? Right? Like, this is the consummate white lady experience. The reason I do the work that I do is because when I was 17, I was held against my will and gang raped for 6 days by 4 white boys. They were late teens, early 20s. One very light-skinned young Black man and a Latino kid. And one of them was the leader, and he forced all of the other boys to also rape me. But here's what I learned about racism. The young, very light-skinned Black man was forced to rape me against his will. He cried the whole time, but if he didn't, the white boy in charge told him, we'll do it to you too. Because for them, white supremacy was about the violence. It was about the control. And so I realized this is literally the worst nightmare I could ever have for myself, but I was not alone in my nightmare. It was also his worst nightmare. And so for me, being in these spaces is always about accountability. It's always about integrity. It is always about listening to people who don't look, see, feel, taste, touch, worship anything like me. There was no sisterhood of survivors when it happened to me. It was over 30 years ago. There was no Me Too. There was no Tarana Burke. There was no white lady talking about it, because there was something even worse about me than a woman who had been violated by a boss or a family member or whatever. There was no home for me. And so I found my sisters everywhere else in the world because they knew exactly what I was talking about. So for me, the work is about finding, when I was younger, I did not understand why the only people I could find were women from other places. The structures in which we live, the messages we are taught by the media in our locality, by the leaders in our locality, I challenge those. I wish I had challenged them more when I was younger, because I feel like maybe I would be farther along, like the world would be farther along the path. But challenging our local structures, even if it's just to yourself, be like, this doesn't feel right. That has been the thing that forced me to do the work that I've done. And the sisters that I found, none of them look anything like me. The woman who changed my life as a young woman, a young Muslim woman named Hawa Salih, she was the 2012 International Woman of Courage. I met her because she's a survivor. And she had been violated by state-sponsored troops in Darfur during the genocide and after the genocide. And so the women who changed my life don't look, think, act, worship anything like me. And it is really important to break these systems. There's so many different ways we can do it. I had to break it in my own life over and over and over and over until I figured out, you know what, I can just tell all of the other white people who don't like what I'm saying or doing that they are wrong. And I think that's a tipping point, that when you do this work, that there comes a moment where your confidence is, no, I'm right and they are wrong. And then you can find your conviction and your confidence in that space. And that's been the thing that's been most transformative for me, is being able to just call it what it is and strip away whatever society tells me it is, like whatever the messages are that women are told wherever you sit, Wherever you are in the world, your society has an opinion about you as a woman. You should be inside, you should be outside, you should be covered, you should be not covered, you should do whatever. All of that is just architecture for the patriarchy to me. If the women are about it, I'm about it, right? Like, not so much interested in, because it doesn't serve men either. It doesn't serve men at all to have this antiquated patriarchal view of everything, right? Like, it doesn't serve them either. It doesn't make the young men happier or healthier or less violent or anything. So to me, it's not just about serving and empowering women. It is serving and empowering everybody. Like, the world will be better if we shed things that control and subjugate any one of us, because there's the saying of none of us are free until all of us are free.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Next up, I want to know how to build some kind of awareness that women can also do other activities than just being a housewife. Maybe you can start first, Elizabeth. What are your thoughts on this?
Get free. To me, one of the greatest things to do, even if you're at the beginning of your path and you don't know how to get there and you're not 100% sure how you want to manifest that for yourself, it is the music we listen to. It's the art we enjoy. There are ways to see a world outside of where we're being controlled. It is, looking at architecture, and it's a lot of different things. It is find your freedom in the small things, and the stones will start laying themselves out before you. It's not easy. It wasn't easy for me, and I'm a white lady from the US. So if it wasn't easy for me, it's certainly not easy for women anywhere else. But what I will say is there's joy to be found in finding your independence. There is joy to be found in being a housewife. Like, my favorite thing I've ever done is be a mom. But that's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to do that. My own daughter doesn't want to do that. So I told all of her friends, all right, I don't know which one of you wants to have babies. Someone needs to bring me a kid. Right? Like, I just want to hold a baby. And so it is being honest about the things that give us joy, and giving and having joy for other people in our lives who don't want the same things. I've learned more from my daughter and her friends and other young activists who, and older activists who've really charted a different path. So if being home and being a housewife is your joy, then claim that. Everybody loves Joanna Gaines. She's at home with her kids too, and she runs the Magnolia Network and has inspired countless women to redo all kinds of things in their life. It is not seeing the traditional roles as one of subjugation. If that's what you want to be, is at home with your kids, then you have to be free to do that as well. I think the stigma works both ways. It's not just you want to go do these big fancy things. It is, I want to be someone who feels comfortable in my home, right? Like, I want to, like, I make soap on the weekends for all of my girlfriends. That's my happy place, is this deeply domestic, but also creative thing. So it is honoring the choices that are made. And even when it makes us uncomfortable, it really starts, to me, it starts at your home, in your home community, is, letting those stones lay out in front of and celebrating when people decide to take a different path, because it teaches us empathy for other choices. And when we have empathy and compassion for other people's choices, eventually you start to have it for yourself. And when you have it for yourself, then that's when really, I think, when really transformational change, when you can see those seeds of a future that may not be what everybody expects of you.
All right, thank you so much. Zara, maybe you can add in on that, regarding this question, what you feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, just what a powerful answer by Elizabeth, and thank you for sharing those very difficult experiences that you faced, and more solidarity and prayers for you, because I think our experiences really do make us, but they can also break us. And I think you've not allowed, your resilience and strength. And I think everybody on this webinar seriously is just so powerful and impactful. So thank you for sharing that. I think, coming back to the question, and how do we allow, I guess it's not about, women being free. I think sometimes freedom is both in the mind, in the mind, but also in our daily life. But it's about the women who feel constrained. And as you were saying, Elizabeth, how do you find the places both here and both in your reality to break that mold? I speak to lots of young women and older women, and sometimes they're in very challenging, so let's be honest, right? Sometimes women find themselves in domestic abuse type situations. They find themselves in very difficult employment, which is very, very male dominated, or it's a bullying culture. They're scared to speak up. We can be a little bit more social, a little bit more nimble. We have the softness within us, as well as the hard and ruthlessness. We know there are women in sectors where they're maybe the only women there. We know there are women who very challenging family or structures. So we know that so I want to kind of present that, look, women are needed in lots of different spaces. We're not talking about one type of women in one type of space. Sometimes the abuse is emotional. Sometimes the abuse is physical. And what we're really saying is, how do we find some freedom? We cannot always find we can't always find the optimum. So for myself, I represent a woman who's been able to achieve a tremendous amount of freedom and empowerment, alhamdulillah, by being elected to this massive faith, leadership organization. But there are still restrictions and limitations. There are still things that I have to overcome, push through. And there are sometimes times where I have to find my freedom. I have to remember that I can do it, that I can push a little bit more. Why can't I do that interview? Why can't I go to that conference? Why can't I go speak to that community? And in some cases, just recently, I spoke to some of the most conservative and senior scholars by myself, the only woman in the room. In my head, I was thinking, oh my God, but then I said to myself, but I represent my organization. I represent something bigger than myself, but also why not? And I think for the women who are really struggling with those limitations, that, you've got to find small steps to freedom. And it's actually about taking small risks within what is safe and comfortable, but also uncomfortable. And knowing that unless you change something, nothing is going to change. And that one thing that I really learned is that no one is really going to save you. People will help you along the way, but no one's going to save you. So when I do my day-to-day, being the leader and running this organization, there are points where you really want to be dependent on others, but they let you down. You really want to put your freedom in others' hands because you think, oh, maybe if we share, it'll be easier. And I'm not talking, that we've got to work in teams and we've got to do things together, but each of us have a personal journey to our freedom. And by that, the journey of finding out what is your gift and sharing that with the world, who you are and who you believe, who you are, because this is who you want to be, not because everybody else has defined you as you're the quiet one. You're not that extrovert, you're not that confident, or, you shouldn't really be working in finance. I mean, it's not really. So think of all those things that people say to you in the course of your life. You can't do public speaking. You'd never be able to talk to they wouldn't listen to you, that little voice in your head. So I think freedom is about overcoming all of that, finding out who you are, pushing yourself forward, but doing it in a way that is true to your reality. We here, myself and Elizabeth, we can't say, go out there now and be free. We don't know your reality. We don't know what you're facing, what your challenges. Maybe you're the caregiver for your whole family. Maybe you're the breadwinner. Maybe you're the person that everybody depends on and you've given up, you sacrificed going to university or your work because your family needs you. We don't know your struggle. So we're not trying to say to you how to be free. What we're saying is that don't close the door to everything else that you could be. Maybe not in this moment, but in those future moments. And that all of us are here to support one another, men and women, all alike, that you have a network of people. And I'll finish on this. You know, I've had some colleagues and friends who, especially in this pandemic, have felt very lonely. You know, friends of people have felt very, very lonely, and they've retreated from life. They've retreated, and they've also woken up to their trauma and the things that they hid in the boxes, yeah, and they've retreated. But I say to them, I said, you're not ever really alone. Whether you're a person of faith and you have that belief in God, or whether actually that you realize there's so many other people who are waiting for you to pick up the phone and call them or drop a message. You're never alone. So don't be alone in this journey, and know that actually there is a global network of support for you, but always someone nearby that you can speak to.
All right, that's very insightful. Thank you so much. So, I have another question. So, what are your thoughts if there are people that have a problem regarding this issue, but they are confused on what they're supposed to do? So, do you have any advice, Zara, on this?
Yeah, I think,
question?
look, we always doubt ourselves, and we always think, I hear this a lot, but is it really an issue? Should I just stay quiet? Is it a problem? And when I would say quite simply, you know, we have an intuitive nature when we know something is wrong. Okay. But if you're not sure, ask, get feedback, look around, do your homework, speak to someone, really understand how you're feeling and why you're feeling, and don't be afraid to challenge. But you don't need to do it with just in haste. You know, think it through, bring people with you, have those conversations with people you trust, but also know that when things are not right, you feel very unsettled inside. You need to listen to that. You need to listen to that. So I would say that, you know, really assess how you're feeling. Don't doubt yourself. Speak to people, get feedback, but also trust yourself and trust that things can get better. You can't ever lose hope, I think. If we all lose hope, then, you know, it would be very hopeless. But I think we have to, you know, and we have to find that there are always, if there's a problem, there's always a solution. Maybe you're just not understanding the true nature of the problem, and you're not really so sometimes I always say to people, maybe you're trying to fix the wrong problem, you know. So I've talked a lot, so I'll pass it over to you, Elizabeth.
I agree with you. I think that it is it's easy to be confused. You know, I still don't know. It also is like, it's confidence is being able to say, I don't know how to solve this problem. I need help is another thing. It is it's not weak, right? So this goes to like the kind of patriarchal structure of the planet for the last 3,000 years is, you know, I know everything, so I'm in charge. No, oh my God, that's so much pressure. You do not. Nobody has all the answers. Like, that's so much pressure. It's so unrealistic. And so I think confidence is also giving yourself, you know, the space to learn. It is, if you're confused, that's good. Lean into that, right? Like, to me, when I didn't understand things, I mean, I only sound like I know what I'm talking about because I failed like 10,000 times, right? Like, you have to be willing to fail and to fall on your face and be like, oh God, that was just a mistake. But learning from those moments and being like, oh, so but it wasn't the end of the world. And it can be little beats of conversations. It doesn't always have to be this like wide sweeping thing that requires like a soundtrack and a film crew. Like, the journey is really about the small spaces between any major moment. The real learning comes when you're confused and say, I wonder why it is this way. Does it have to be this way? And asking people you trust. And also, it's just finding my confidence is really about being able to appreciate tiny moments that hold meaning only to me, where I said a thing and I didn't fall on my face, right? And that's like asking Dr. Mukwege, or the former ambassador at large for the War Crimes Issues Office, asking a question and being like, oh, that's a really good question. I don't know. Let's figure it out. And, it was just in the middle of a conversation. It didn't register as interesting to anybody but me. But for me, I was like, I'm on to something, right? So don't dismiss your own moments of awareness or realization or learning something. It is when you learn something and you feel comfortable with it and you take a step or ask a question of someone and they just take it in stride. Those moments are really important. And I am always telling women that we're working with or that I coach is when you have that moment of realization, hold on to it, right? Like hold on to it and think about it at the end of the day. What about that felt good? What did I learn? How can I replicate that moment? How can I do these little things? Because it's never the big sweeping things that happen that seem transformative. There are thousands of people who made that happen. There are, thousands of those little tiny moments that help to push the rocks up the hill. Nelson Mandela got to be president, but he was, like Zara was mentioning, he was imprisoned for 27 years. And every moment of every day, that whole time, there were people writing songs. There was art created about him. There were movements about liberation and people understanding the work that he did and why it was so important. And the Pan-African ideas of, that really influenced a lot of other people, myself included. So there's a million little tiny moments that every human being has that helps to thread all of us together. So to me, it would be just hold on to those moments where you have an aha and think about it at the end of the day and keep them, because they are few and far between, right? Like when you really connect with another person or you really nail an idea, you have those things, hold on to them, because those become the stones and the building blocks that get you to the liberation you seek, whatever that looks like.
All right. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. All right. So I think we're going on the last question before the Q&A. So maybe the audience, if, since we're about to have our last question, you should have your questions lined up. So would you please share with us how we can prevent the mindset that women have less impact and less voice than men? And what are we supposed to do regarding this issue that occurs in public and the social media, especially since we start to move more and more, like we have more and more activities so close and online so closely because of the pandemic? Maybe Elizabeth, you can elaborate more on that.
Sure. So society tells people who want to challenge the status quo that their voice doesn't matter. And I just don't care. So this is, that's one of the things to me, and it's really hard to get to this place. But the thing for me is that structure is an artifice. It's not real. It's not where we really live and work. Everybody, it's like I said earlier today, is that the internet is the great leveler. And yes, there are people who have larger voices in that space, but movements and questions can be asked. And even though it can be very difficult, I really do believe that if we lean into those spaces, you can always find community. It doesn't come without a cost, as Zara mentioned too. Like it does come with a cost, right? There are mean people, there are people who are unstable, people who are prone to violence, who will say all manner of things, and it does force you to grow a very thick skin. But there are communities out there that you can build. So if you feel alone or you can't go out, if you're stuck at home, whether it's the pandemic or because you're the provider of care in your family, there are ways for you to build a different, to build a different life. And I just wholeheartedly disagree with patriarchal notions of who's the boss. It does not have to be this way. And I'm really lucky in that I don't always have to subscribe to it. But I know for me, I only got to this place where I feel like I don't care after many years of really doing a lot of unlearning of things I was taught, right? Like I was taught when I was young by my grandmother, not my parents much, but my grandmother certainly viewed my utility on this planet as the host of a man's child and the caregiver for everything that he said, thought, did, or believed. And she loved me very much, but she didn't know any different. And I love her so much. She is the reason that I know how to make the best peach cobbler, right? And I love that I have that knowledge from her, but that is not who I was supposed to be. And so it is also just knowing, like, do I want to be, you know, these things that my society expects of me, regardless of where you are. Like that list of things that 3,000 years of, you know, of patriarchy has taught all of us, it manifests differently wherever you are. But to me, that's just geography, right? Like we're still people. And as individuals, there is a, you know, how do I want to view myself in my society? How do I want to live? How do I want to participate? What does my future look like? What is the future for my kids or my friends' kids or the kids down the street? What does that look like? And how much of where we are today do I want to accept and identify with? And how much of it do I want to be different for me or someone else? And so, you know, I think that folks, don't limit yourself because it seems safe and easy. If you want to accept something, accept it wholeheartedly and live authentically. And don't be troubled, because that's an identity worth protecting too. If I want to be at home with my kid, then I want to be home with my kid. And I need someone who is loud and obnoxious, like I am, to defend my right to do that. Just as much as another person may need someone strong and obnoxious like me to defend their right not to do that. And to not judge people who feel differently about their experience. I just accept it. Like, you want kids? Great. You don't want kids? Also great. You want to work at home? Cool. You don't want to work at home? Also great. You want an education? Awesome. All of those things are happening anyway. People are making those choices. So society has limited us, like, oh, you can only do these things. But that's not what's happening. People are already making all those different decisions all day, every day, everywhere in the world. So it is defending all of those choices helps to get all of us to a more holistic and happier place. But it comes at a cost if you want to lead in the space. And the other thing I say is you don't have to be the leader. You can lead in your own life and make those choices for you, knowing that there are people out there who have your back. And I think it's sometimes hard to find that, but it is true.
Thank you. Maybe Zara, you can have your advice on that and elaborate more on that.
Yeah, do you want to just repeat the question again for me?
All right, sorry. So the question is, could you share with us how you can prevent the mindset that women have less impact and less voice than men? So what are we supposed to do regarding the issues that occurs in public and social media? Especially it's the pandemic and all activities are online, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, look, it's important. And that's why we need role models and reference points and evidence-based conversation. Look, nowadays, I think now more than ever, we have seen an incredible surge of women in leadership and roles all over society, not just, business and politics, but sport, the Olympics. We saw women in headscarf and, fencing. and judo. I believe, so we're in weightlifting as well, was really big this time around. There's a lot of women. So women are now winning in lots of different spaces. They're startup entrepreneurs. They came up with the COVID vaccine. They are in science and industry and engineering. They are, they're everywhere. And that's what we have to use. You have women who have taken that really difficult road to excel in lots of different spaces, so that we can say, I can do that too. I can go play cricket if I want it. I can be a politician. I can lead a business. I can have a startup. I can make a medical breakthrough. I attended a massive dinner in London, called Women of the Year lunch. And that room was a powerhouse of women who had done everything from arts and industry, who had been in the entertainment business for 40, 50, 60 years, right? Loads of movies, loads of fun, to women who were on the cutting edge of STEM and science, who had, developed technology, green technology that was now being made all over the world, to women who were empowering refugee communities by giving them the ability to tutor and get paid for it. So, and translate, and so we've got women in all different spaces doing lots of things, to a very, very local level, like as we said, to the women who are supporting their families, taking care of their siblings, to teachers who are, teachers I think are incredible. So I think this is about sharing those examples, finding those examples and having them ready to say, well, no, what are you talking about? Women can do this. And then the best thing for all of this is lead by example. So don't wait for permission. Don't wait for someone to say, yeah, actually, I agree. I think a woman can do that. Just do it. So just do it, lead, do start something yourself. The great thing about being online is you can set up a website tomorrow, today. You can have a huge following. You can sell, you can earn, you can learn, you have that all at your fingertips. I think now more than ever, the opportunity is amazing, is incredible. And I think also the language now is about inclusion and diversity. The language now is about women empowerment. So we're actually living in an era where even the communities I represent and beyond that, challenging the role of what women can and can't do is becoming increasingly taboo and unacceptable. I'm sure there's still places in the world where, but I think we've got the upper hand here on the wave of change, that people accept, whether they're willing to or not. This is the curve. This is the curve. Things are changing. And you know where that really comes from? It comes from women themselves. And I say this to some of our own leaders. I said, look, you can change your institution, or you can or can't. It's up to you. You can change or you can't. But we are going to continue. We're going to continue. We will go where we can belong. We will build those buildings if we can't belong in these ones. We will find a place. And actually, we now know that if it isn't there, we'll create it, or we'll find people that are like-minded on that journey. So I think we shouldn't be afraid, and we shouldn't wait for people to say that we can be freer, that we can have a voice. I think all of that's irrelevant. We already do. We already should. And we are, right? Now is actually about creating the pathways, fortifying it, making ourselves stronger. But our biggest barrier to change is ourselves. And I hope that everybody on this call is going to be an advocate and going to be someone who's going to help. As you talk about the bystander effect, when you're in a meeting, to give another example, sometimes I'm in meetings. It's a bit different now, I'm the boss, but sometimes in meetings, and you'll get one or two people that love to dominate. They love to dominate. They like to be the loud voice, men or women, yeah? These individuals who have bigger than life personality. And I see a lot of people, and they sit quietly. And I think, but I'm pretty sure you're here because you've got something to add too. So as good leaders, and I'm not saying just because you're the head of the organ, as good leaders and good advocates, we have to say, I'd really like to hear what you have to say. You have to equalize the room. You have to give people the ability and the opportunity to speak and to share because they've got something else. Otherwise, we're only amplifying the loud and we're silencing the minority. And, sometimes that is about women empowering men too. That's sometimes about women empowering women. But ultimately, everybody has value Everybody has value. And so I think it's so important that don't make this about some super duper conversation about historic change. This is everyday life. What are you doing? What are your habits in everyday life? How you talk to people, how you make people feel valuable. And as a leader, that's what I always think about, which is I have to take everybody across this bridge. We have to get everybody across, right? We have to get them all there. But everybody communicates differently. They've got different lived experiences. They come from, and sometimes not everybody wants to cross the bridge. Now, sometimes they don't all want to come, right? So we have to do our best. We have to take people with us. We have to understand people, but we need to look at our own actions. Are we empowering forces? Or are we contributing to the problem because of our own biases? So I think there's plenty to do, but I have every confidence that we're on a good change. We're on a good wave of change. And it's been such an incredible conversation to have with yourself as well, Elizabeth, and just hearing the work that you're doing, because I think that is happening globally, right? We're on different sides of the world, all of us here on different sides of the world. So take confidence in that.
All right, thank you so much to both Zara and Elizabeth. So, this truly has been such an interesting session. I will never be able to say anything to sell it short. So I hope all of us have not only learned about women's voice that matter, but will also implement the things that we have learned today. So now we will move on to the sessions you have been waiting for, the question and answer session. Should you have any questions for Elizabeth or Zara, you can write it down on the live chat or on the chat box. You can also use the raise hand feature and unmute yourself after I call your name. Thank you, and we will be waiting for your interesting questions. All right, we have Claudia here. How to deal with society that believe in patrilineal line, and how to speak with respect to older women that force us to get married. Maybe Zara, you can answer that first.
Yeah, I mean, look, that is a really tough question because it kind of goes back to what we were talking about when you come from very traditional, very strong cultural understanding. I think in this situation, you need male allies. So you need to find that uncle, cousin, or even the father. You need to find men and women around you that are more understanding and that want to give you a little bit more. So in some ways, part of the issue is, well, what do you see for yourself? What is it that you want? So understanding that and understanding that, okay, for me to get beyond this, I need to bring others into this conversation to help me. I need to find some people who maybe have done things a bit differently, and I can say, well, so and so, they actually did that and they turned out fine and nobody died. But also finding some of those elders that understand that there's good, and sometimes it's about selling it, sometimes about evidence, but really it does come back to you. You need to look and assess the situation and think, okay, how can I push and what's in the best way? For me, I deal with a lot of really conservative, and I have to be very respectful, but I understand how they think and I have to talk in their language and understand for them culture and these values are very, very important because they're afraid of what happens if we don't do them. So in some ways, it's about helping understand that fear is sometimes irrational. So I think, and especially with older women, this is what they were used to. They were brought up, they were told this is what you do, you got to get married, and this is, and this is it, and this is the best thing. So breaking that becomes very challenging, but I think you need to find people who can support you in that conversation. And you also need to find within yourself a bit of courage to be able to have it and say, look, I'm willing to do this, but can we do it when I'm this age? And can I be allowed to do a little bit more here? And maybe it's about negotiation too. But Elizabeth, I know you deal with a lot of this kind of thing, so maybe you might have a bit more insight.
No, I completely agree with what you said there. As I was mentioning, like my own grandmother very much viewed our value as women as tied to marriage and childbirth, right? And raising children and making the home and but I think, was she really happy 100% with that? Or was that an expectation that was also forced on her, right? Like she also didn't have that choice. And so as much as we want things, I think it's important to also have empathy and compassion for the people who believe that, right? Like if she really believed that, I think I might have had more productive conversations with her now that I've learned so much more about life than I would have, than I certainly did at the time. But it's important to have male allies, to have other women who maybe think a little bit more progressively. My kind of fire breathing feminist side is like, no, but that's not always the reality. That's not really how you can navigate when that is such a deeply complex situation, because it's often tied. I mean, for my grandmother, it was certainly tied to her very conservative view of religion. Yeah. And her faith journey was very much tied to that, as like, that was what you do. And so there is empathy and compassion to be had in those discussions. But it's also finding allies who can be with you to help craft a path that isn't as traditional. But it is not an easy conversation. And I would not pretend to understand what that means in other cultural contexts. For me, it means being ostracized, but that's not always the consequence for other women, particularly young women. But that tension is evident. It's why I brought the Time's Up situation, is that you have all of these older women, largely white, but also other women who believed that they are the gatekeepers to feminism. And as a survivor, if you don't pay fealty to their specific accomplishments and list them out by name, then you're not welcome and we're not going to help you. So this isn't just something that is happening in conservative religious spaces. It's happening with very progressive, very publicly feminist leaders who also are, very comfortable to enjoy adjacency to patrilineal power. And so that's why I say, I was saying earlier, like, understanding the patriarchy as a trademark, big global thing for a long, long period in history, where you live is just geography. The patriarchy is serving people in power. That's who it serves. It is not there to serve normal people. It is there. It's just there. People take it for granted. So these individual conversations can be quite fraught. But I think understanding your relationship with that makes it easier to have conversations with other people who might be more progressive, not in a political way, but progressive, just like, hey, our kids don't need to do these things that we did just because we did them. They can do other things. They can build buildings and, fly to the moon. They can do all of that stuff and still be whatever. So I do think it's a complicated conversation to have. And I think that it's important to have, but finding other allies in your family and your community who those elder women might also trust is really important. But I'm a white lady in the US. What do I know about how complex those conversations might be for women who don't live, work, or worship where I am?
All right, thank you so much, Zara and Elizabeth. So I believe we have Karen here raising her hand. Karen, maybe you can turn on your camera and ask the question right away.
Okay, wait a minute. Hello. Actually, I'm the mother of Karen. Actually, I get this meeting with my daughter also. I have a bit learning after this absolutely amazing talks and response, and I heard a lot. But I'm still a bit confused about the patriarchy in my country. There's a hierarchy that said patriarchy about the patriarchal, and also there's have to obligate the husband or maybe the man as to be a perfect leaders. Maybe as a religion also, I'm also a Muslim. I'm sorry, I'm not wearing my hijab. It's very convenient. Okay. But actually, I have to teach my children also. Women, I have a mission. Women have to be absolute equal. That's why I'm very feeling well. But in this country, still and in local especially, there's a husband still in up to be loud voice. But what I mean is how we can to approach our husbands or men in the house to respect our opinion also without disrespecting them. That is my question. Thank you. My question.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Karen. And I think important question. I'd be happy to, as a Muslim woman, I'd be happy to respond to, because look, I come from that same culture. We're a little bit different. I'm third generation. We're in the UK. Things are a bit different, but I absolutely know what you're talking about. And I would say, first of all, don't be so worried, because the woman is the first university of the child, right? So you yourself can be the empowerment for your children. You can educate your children and you can help them understand the right values. So before you go out into that other world, what made me strong and independent and confident was my mother. And my father was very supportive as well, I'll say. But my mother was the one she got married at the age of 21. She left her home. She met my father on the day, and that's how it was. That's how it was done. It's not, we might think, oh my God, but that's just the culture. It was arranged. Parents know each other, everybody, and they're still married today, 4 kids. So let's, we don't need to look at it as, oh my. So my mother was married at 21. She invested all of her, she was working. Nobody wanted her to work. She worked. She said, I need to work. She said to me, Zara, I worked for you because I wanted to show you what women could do. She would put me in a room and give me lots of books to read, art sets. Both my parents would feed our neighbors. They didn't like anybody to be left hungry. They taught us that. They taught us that you got to talk to all of society, even if they're not the same religion as you. You got to work with everybody. So the key things that I've learned is our parents are so important to our education before we get into that world and before the world tells us how things need to be. But most importantly, when you're dealing with very strong cultural issues, sometimes it takes a generation, and we have to accept that it's going to take a little bit longer for things to change. And with our spouses and our husbands, you need to help them understand. And this is where knowledge is power. Our religion is very powerful when it comes to the rights of women. We just don't know it. So I would say equip yourself with that knowledge. Equip yourself with, there's a vast amount of theology and scholarship. But I can tell you right now that the rights are there, the empowerment is there. Otherwise, mosques wouldn't have elected me as the leader of this organization. So I think be strong, be confident, get the knowledge, but know that you can shape your child who can then go on and shape a world, and don't be afraid of that. But I think, as we've all said, look, your struggle is yours. It is very challenging. Society isn't going to change overnight. And sometimes it takes a couple of generations, but you have to do your bit, and you can't lose hope. As a person of faith, I believe that God is absolutely on our side in this cause.
Thank you, Zara. Maybe Elizabeth, you want to have in addition to that?
Just briefly, I think it's it can be very easy to lose faith. These kinds of situations are so they're so challenging when you can see freedom just over the fence line, right? And so I think it's important to just acknowledge that it is not always going to be easy. But that does not mean you have been forsaken.
All right. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Now we have another participant raising her hand. Her name is Eka Septian. You can shoot away your question to Elizabeth and Zara.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to say thank you for Zara and also Elizabeth for sharing all of those insightful, and that really just touched my heart. And I got a lot of things from their sharing. And my questions are, I have two questions here. First is, then how should men's roles be in societies in today's world? And the second is, can women movements actually be acceptable in all of different places in the world? Because I think while in some countries the roots, the background, and also the culture are very strong, what is it like related to women, that women cannot go outside, they cannot have seat in politics and stuff. But also some of the countries, they're just the women there have a lot of freedom, right? So sometimes we just can't, change things that have been inherently passed down. So how's that? I mean, can this movement or women's rights be acceptable in all of different places? And thank you.
Okay, shall I go? So I mean, look, let's first of all, I think let's not oversimplify, because when we talk about women's right, it comes back to this: the world is different and women are different, and how rights happen are going to be different too. Yes, we have very kind of Western liberal democracies, but women suffer from gender pay gaps here too. Women suffer from institutional barriers and discrimination, sexual harassment, right? Then we've got other parts of the world where it's very, very conservative, very religious, but at the same time, how do we know what their journey of freedom actually is? How do we know what they perceive as freedom? Because for them, it might be, well, actually, my husband should work and earn for me, and I don't believe I should be doing that because I should be taking care of my kids or actually enjoying my life, So I think we can't have one view of what empowerment looks like. And also we can't expect everybody's empowerment to happen at the same time and in the same way. There are some societies that are very unjust to women. We accept that. But at the same time, even within those societies, what women want has to be defined by them and has to be led by them too. So I think it's starting where we are, not where they are. And it's understanding that nowadays we have global movements of change, but they can't be exclusionary. They can't be one person's view of empowerment. Some women in this world would regard this as oppressive. Yeah? Some women in the world would tell me, you are oppressed because you wear a headscarf. In France, I can't wear this if I want to work in the public sector. Is that women? And they will say that's the leading women's think tanks will say that is women's rights. Is that women's rights? Is that empowerment? Some women would say to me, well, you are in a religion that oppresses women. Have you seen what they do in Saudi Arabia? Have you seen what you do? Right? So whose rights are we talking about? So I would say don't fall into the trap of believing that one side is really good and one side is really bad. Know that everyone's struggle is different. But I will define empowerment and rights for me, yeah? You don't get to do that for me, wider society. You can't tell me that this is oppressive. Many people will see, even in here, within where I live in the UK, Muslim women face Islamophobia. We can't get jobs because we look like this. Where are women's rights then, right? So I think we have to be really careful about when we speak about this topic, particularly because I'm part of a marginalized community in society, and I know that there are women's groups that will not see me as free or empowered, or I don't have rights. Whereas I would say, well, who are you to decide? And I think globally, I have full solidarity with women who are going through so many different issues, where very strong patriarchal structures, where there is very strong male leadership, and you have to be but at the same time, like it's not just one, it's different, it's diverse. You go to those places and you meet those people, they will tell you a different story about what their struggle is. So I think when we're bystanders, let's be careful of how we talk about other people's truths and realities, and let's think about our own. What are we doing? How are we helping? And are we ourselves empowered? Where are we on that journey? So I think it's a very challenging one, but look, we can't lose hope. But ultimately, change happens in time. All change takes time, and sometimes what we think is empowerment may be even more shackles for us because it's someone else's version of empowerment, not our own. So I think it's an important topic, but one that we have to take the global community of women with us on that journey.
Yeah, I would add only two small things, and I completely got that's just such a powerful testimony to what it means to be a woman in the world. Is that and from an American perspective, I will tell you that this oppression, whether it is oppression that women face in pay gaps and things like that here in the US, but certainly the business model of oppression is something that I think a lot about now that I have the space and platform to do so. I speak about it a lot more, and I have a lot of questions about it. And I think we have been taught things that serve that business model. I saw that there was a question in the chat about our women to women's sensitiveness and our feelings, and how do we raise our voice and how do we keep it valuable. And it goes back to this business model, because it's not just that women's groups will tell Islamic women that, oh, well, you're not really free if you're wearing a headscarf. Like I have no idea what freedom looks like to other women. So the presumption of that comes from a place that is not only unhelpful and not truly about women's empowerment, not truly about that. It serves the business model from the West, right? Like this is not, to me, it is a business model that was sold as patriotism and patriarchy. And the adjacency to that power is why those women's groups say those kinds of things. Unlearning taking all of the things that I was taught, that society told me, that our Western media tells us, all of this stuff feeds a business model that separates normal people in one place from normal people in another place. It is a business model that keeps us from knowing the truth of each other. And I believe that there are more people who want to see freedom, whatever it looks like, than people who do not want to see freedom. But the people who do not want to see it have a very successful business model that goes to, well, women are sensitive, except that women don't start wars, men do. Businesses do. So I don't want to hear that women are sensitive. And this is an argument I have with a lot of people. I don't want to hear women are sensitive when we don't start wars. I don't want to hear that we're hysterical. We don't start wars. I don't want to hear any of those things. None of that. It doesn't make sense to me as a leader. The business model of oppression brings with it in this kind of weird, strange patriotism, singular identity, one path to freedom. It only looks this way. You people in this place need this violence to be, no, absolutely reject it wholeheartedly. But it is deeply ingrained in a lot of places around the world, and it benefits people in power all over the planet. They make deals without ever talking to the regular people. And so to me, leadership and empowerment is about unlearning, taking all those things that we were taught and taking them and setting them to the side. I question everything now, everything. And I unlearn everything every single day. Because the moment I realized as a Westerner that everything I knew was not true, I had to start at the beginning. And so as Zara was saying, it does take time. And so that's why I said to Karen earlier, like, you are not forsaken. No one is forsaken. We are not forgotten. We are equal, however we live. And so whatever it looks like in the place where you are living, you get to define what your liberation looks like. And nobody else, no business model, no corporation, no patrilineal or matrilineal discussion, they do not get to decide what gets you free. You get to decide what gets you free.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for the great answers, and also Zara. But I'm sure many of you have questions for our amazing speakers, but due to time constraints, we must end the question and answer session. I would like to remind you that the giveaway will be closing right after this webinar. So if you want to win this ticket, please share your Instagram story during this webinar and tag at Global Millennial Group and Global Millennial MUN, and then take a screenshot of proof and submit it to the bit.ly/GA-GMMUN, and the 5 lucky winners will be announced after the sessions end in the Telegram group. Now we will present a certificate for Elizabeth and Zara as a token of appreciation and honor. So could you please share the screen for the certificate, please? All right, okay. So yes. All right. So since the certificate is already here, and maybe we can just have a photo session real quick. Can you all please turn on your cameras and show your beautiful faces so that we can screenshot and have this memorized in, our Instagram stories and feeds as well. All right. So is everyone ready? Okay, let's just have this photo real quick. Can the host also please screenshot our pictures? Okay. All right. Okay, I see everyone turning on their cameras. All right. Okay, maybe the host can just turn off the shared screen if that's okay. Yes. All right. Okay. Okay, are you guys ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, last one. 1, 2, 3. Okay, you guys look really good. Well, now we're at the end of this webinar, and I want to thank you for the magnificent speakers, Elizabeth Blackney, as well as Zara Mohammed, for giving our outstanding and thought-provoking answers. It was such an honor to be able to discuss the topic of women's voice matter and how women's voice have less impact than men's with you, as well as learn from you. I would like to thank all of the participants who have stayed through this webinar, and we can only hope that this discussion has brought your insights that are highly informative and useful from us now in the future. We would also like to remind you to fill the feedback form that has been shared in the chat. This will help us in learning more about what you would like to see us from in the future. On behalf of the Global Millennial team, I would like to apologize should there be any inconveniences during today's webinar. We cannot wait to see you in the next one. Thank you so much to everyone, and also Elizabeth and Zara Mohammed. I hope that you have a great night and a great day. Thank you so much all for coming. Hope that you have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. It was wonderful being here.
Thank you all so much. Wonderful to meet you, Zara.
Yeah, great to meet virtually too. My first ever virtual certificate. So thank you, Global Millennial. Take care. It's just the start of the day for us. So yeah, plenty to get on with. Have a fabulous weekend, everybody. Assalamu alaikum.
Take care, everybody. Thank you all so much.
Have a great weekend, everybody.